All right. Good morning, guys. Prateek, good morning. Am I audible? आवाज आ रही है? Good morning. Good morning. Right. So we were in the middle of discussing the socio-religious reformers. हमने उनके issues discuss कर लिए थे, ideas discuss कर लिए थे. Now we were discussing the individuals and their institutions. Raja Ram Mohan Roy we had covered, including his thoughts, his contribution to social work, his contribution to education and politics, and finally his legacy. Now we have to do the same for Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan and his Aligarh movement. Right? So once again similar pattern follow करेंगे. His thought, first of all, he was inspired by the traditional Islamic philosophy of the Holy Quran and the Hadith, right? So you can write down, he was inspired by the philosophy of the Quran and the Hadith. Right? Hadith तो पता है ना क्या होता है? These are the traditions of the Prophet. Now, although he was inspired by the traditional Islamic philosophy, he also realized that there are certain practices within Islam which need to be re-evaluated in light of the modern world, right? So the Quran and the Hadith had been created by the Prophet in light of 7th century Arabian society. The same conditions do not prevail in 19th century India, and thus some of those practices must be discarded or re-evaluated in a modern sense. So write down next point. At the same time, he believed that many Islamic laws and practices such as polygamy and parda need a modern scientific appraisal. ठीक है? So he wanted the Muslim community of India to revisit these issues. All right. And in order to convince them to revisit these issues, he realized that the hold that the traditional Islamic teachings had on the Indian Muslim community needs to be recalibrated. It needs to be moderated with modern scientific education. So he considered that Indian Muslims were backward looking. They were backward overall, socially and economically also, philosophically and intellectually also. And what was the solution to that? Modern Western education. ठीक है? Next point लिखो. According to him, only modern scientific education can uplift Indian Muslims from their backwardness. ठीक है. Now he was a prominent figure among the Indian Muslim community, within the Indian Muslim community during the British rule. He was also serving as a civil judge under the British. He had regular contact with English officials and even visited England on several occasions. And he was a great, you can say, admirer of English society. तो जिस पैटर्न पे इंग्लिश सोसाइटी बेस्ड था, जो वैल्यूज इंग्लिश सोसाइटी को गवर्न करते थे, ही वांटेड द सेम पैटर्न एंड सेम वैल्यूज टू बी एमुलेटेड बाय इंडियंस. ठीक है. सो वन अदर सोर्स ऑफ हिज थॉट वाज द इंग्लिश वैल्यू सिस्टम, इंग्लिश सोशल सिस्टम. राइट डाउन. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. he was also a great admirer he was also a great admirer of the English society and its values and wanted Indian Muslims to emulate the same. ठीक है. तो क्या देखा है हमने? ट्रेडिशनल इस्लामिक फिलॉसफी से he was inspired. However, he understood that several Islamic laws and practices need to be modified in accordance with modern scientific thought. For that, it was important to spread modern Western scientific education among Indians in order for Indian Muslims to emulate the English society, its values and discipline in life. ठीक है. Next, his contribution to education. His contribution to education. सबसे पहले इन्होंने क्या किया? That he set up a Mohammedan scientific literary society at Ghazipur in present day UP. So write down. He set up the Mohammedan Scientific Literary Society at Ghazipur. क्या काम था इसका? Not to spread education among Indian Muslims, but to translate modern scientific Western works, scientific as well as social science works, into Urdu, so that they could be readily taken by the Indian Muslims. In order to translate European scientific works into Urdu. ठीक है. Second thing, write down. In 1875, he established the Mohammedan Anglo Oriental College at Aligarh. Along the lines of Oxbridge, Oxford, Cambridge के लाइंस पर, along the lines of Oxbridge, residential universities. Full stop. Later in 1920, it was reconstituted as the Aligarh Muslim University. So you can write down, in 1920, it was reconstituted as the Aligarh Muslim University. Next point, third, he was also the first Indian to set up a school for Muslim girls. For Muslim girls. ठीक है? Now, one problem with Urdu was that it had a large number of difficult Arabic and Persian words and phrases. जो बांग्ला का प्रॉब्लम था ना, वही उर्दू में भी प्रॉब्लम था, and that made it inaccessible to the common masses. Since Urdu was the lingua franca of the Muslim masses of North India, in order to make it easily accessible to them, it needed to be simplified. That is what he also did. So write down, he also simplified Urdu prose writing, Urdu prose writing by freeing it, from the jargon of Arabic and Persian words. Arabic and Persian words. So earlier it used to be heavily Persianized, heavily Arabized. अब उसमें थोड़े colloquial vernacular को include किया. Next, right. He also appealed to poets to write poetry with a purpose. Urdu poetry before this period was heavily romanticized. Themes क्या कवर होती थी? Wine, women, घटाएं, फिजाएं, ये सब चीजें कवर होती थी, right? So it is very beautiful, but उसका कोई social message नहीं होता था, right? He asked the poets to write poetry with purpose, touching upon social issues, touching upon positive values such as sacrifice, hard work, ambition. इन सब चीजों पे फोकस करने के लिए उन्होंने अपील किया. Next, right. He was also the first Indian to write a book on the Great Revolt. He was also the first Indian to write a book on the Great Revolt, namely Asbab a Bagawate Hind. Asbab e Bagawate Hind. That is causes for the revolt of Hind, India. ठीक है? And finally लिखो. He began publishing a magazine called Tahzeeb ul Akhlaq in Urdu to teach morals and etiquettes to young minds. To young minds. तहजीब का मतलब होता है civilization and akhlaq is etiquette. That is what is the proper behavior in different circumstances, different situations. तो उसमें इस तरह की चीजें बताई जाती थी कि अगर आप किसी गैदरिंग में हो तो मेन से कैसे बात करनी चाहिए, विमेन से कैसे बात करनी चाहिए, कैसे बैठना चाहिए, कैसे खड़ा रहना चाहिए, हाउ यू शुड ईट फूड, कंज्यूम फूड, अपने जूनियर्स को कैसे ट्रीट करना चाहिए, सीनियर्स को कैसे ट्रीट करना चाहिए, इस तरह की बातें, राइट. सो इट वाज मेंट फॉर यंग माइंड्स, बच्चों के लिए किताब होती थी. तो these are his contributions in the field of education. क्या क्या है? The Mohammedan Scientific Literary Society, the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College, which later became the Aligarh Muslim University, a school for Muslim girls. He simplified Urdu prose writing, appealed to poets to write poetry with purpose, wrote a book on the Great Revolt, and published a magazine for spreading moral education and etiquettes among young Indian Muslim boys and girls. Right? तो ये हो गया contribution to education. Third is contribution to politics. Now, Sir Sayyid Ahmad का chief objective क्या था? To modernize the Muslim society by spreading modern Western education among them. For this, who did he need the support of? किसका support चाहिए था उनको? सरकार का support चाहिए था. सरकार अंग्रेजों की थी. So would he be pro-British or anti-British? Pro-British, loyalist थे. ठीक है? So write down. Sir Sayyid realized the importance of British support. Realized the importance of British support for the success of his educational mission. For the success of his educational mission. Thus, he adopted a loyalist position with respect to the British. With respect to the British. ठीक है? Similarly, this is also going to be reflected in his preaching to the Indian Muslims. He told the Indian Muslims that you are socially and educationally backward as compared to the Hindus. If you become anti-British and force the British to leave India along with the Hindus, you are going to be left behind in a country where you are going to be perpetually marginalized. So the first course of action should be to strengthen yourselves, bring yourselves at the same level as the Hindus, and then and only then can you talk about independence or स्वराज. तो उसके पहले इसके बारे में बात करने की जरूरत नहीं है. Till that stage is achieved, what should be the attitude of the ordinary Muslim towards the British? Pro-British or anti-British? Pro-British होना चाहिए, right? Because they are dependent upon the British support to bring them on at the same level as the Hindus. So write down. This loyalist approach, next point. This loyalist approach is also reflected in his preaching to the Indian Muslims. He encouraged them to remain loyal to the British, since they are relatively backward to Hindus, and if British rule ended suddenly, they would never be able to achieve parity. They would never be able to achieve parity. And if British rule ended suddenly, they would never be able to achieve parity. ठीक है? So what do you think would be his attitude towards the Congress? प्रो ब्रिटिश, प्रो कांग्रेस, एंटी कांग्रेस? एंटी कांग्रेस, क्योंकि कांग्रेस एंटी ब्रिटिश थी और सर सैयद प्रो ब्रिटिश थे, राइट? Secondly, he also considered the Congress to not be a legitimate representative of Indian Muslims, and for that he has cited the membership of the early Congress. So if you look at the list of names of the early members of the Congress, you are going to find that the bulk of them came from upper caste Hindu background, right? चाहे बंगाल से, चाहे बॉम्बे से, चाहे मद्रास से. Muslims were a very minuscule minority in the early Congress leadership. So, in the eyes of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, these people are going to represent only and only their interests. He labeled the Congress as a caste Hindu party, an upper caste Hindu party, which can never legitimately represent the interest of the Indian Muslims. अगर वो करते भी हैं, so it would be nothing more than lip service. कोई substantial advocacy for reform नहीं होगा. So write down. When the Congress was formed in 1885, he appealed to Muslims, including Badruddin Tayyabji, to boycott it. To boycott it. ठीक है? वो अलग बात है कि बदरुद्दीन तैयबजी joined it and also served as the third Congress president in 1887. लेकिन अपील इन्होंने किया था कि ना ज्वाइन करें. तो राइट डाउन सब पॉइंट में. His anti-Congress position was due to the following factors. Number one, he believed that association with the Congress would destroy the goodwill of the British. Would destroy the goodwill of the British towards the Indian Muslims. And number two, towards Indian Muslims. और second लिखो. He believed that the Congress was a caste Hindu organization. Was a caste Hindu organization. ठीक है? Is this much clear? Right. तो ये हो गए इनका political contributions. And lastly लिखो, his legacy. His legacy. Over here we have to evaluate his legacy on the basis of his educational qualifications separately and political contributions separately. ठीक है? So if we are to evaluate his legacy based on his educational contributions, तो वो पॉजिटिव लेगेसी की तरह इमर्ज होता है, नेगेटिव लेगेसी की तरह? पॉजिटिव. क्यों? क्योंकि विदाउट हिम, अगर ये शुरुआत नहीं करते, इंडियन मुस्लिम्स वुड स्टिल हैव कंटिन्यूड to think in the way that 19th century Indian Muslims were thinking. They were distinctly medieval. On the other hand, among Hindus, the first steps towards modernization had already started taking place. The Hindus initially also had an early lead over the Muslims in terms of socio-economic advancement. Hindus had adopted Western education more readily than the Indian Muslims. They were already ahead. और अगर उस अर्ली लीड को कैचअप करने की कोशिश सर सैयद जैसे लोग नहीं करते, the gap between Hindus and Muslims would have become too wide to overcome, right? And in that case, not only would there have been a very strong religious divide based on contrasting values, the modern Hindu and the medieval Muslim, ये हो जाता, but at the same time class distinction भी बहुत बढ़ जाता, ठीक है? And that would have had even more disastrous results than happened during partition and after, ठीक है? So write down. Sir Sayyid's educational mission proved to be the foundational step towards modernizing Indian Muslims. ठीक है? The graduates of, next point, the graduates of Aligarh, established similar institutions in other regions, right? Resulting in the emergence of an all India Muslim middle class इंटेलिजेंसिया, ठीक है? एंड ये जो मुस्लिम मिडिल क्लास इंटेलिजेंसिया है, which kind of values and ideologies is it going to subscribe to traditional values and ideology or to modern values, liberal values? Modern liberal values. So write down. This resulted in the emergence of a modernizing liberal movement among Muslims. And what was the impact of this movement among ordinary Muslims of India? To a certain degree, under the leadership of this class, the rest of the Muslim community also started transforming towards the modern liberal views, modern liberal notions and ideology. Okay, so write down. This had the effect of gradually transforming the common Muslim masses of India from tradition towards modernity of India from tradition towards modernity. ठीक है? Next point. These developments also reduced the socio-economic gap between Hindus and Muslims to some extent. Thus, reducing the potential friction between them. ठीक है? And since the leadership was in the hands of this class, what kinds of methods of political activism would be preferred? The traditional methods such as war, revolt, rioting, or modern methods such as democratic methods would be preferred. Next point. It also had the effect of democratizing the Indian Muslims. ठीक है? अच्छा, अब since the leadership is in the hands of this class, are they going to subscribe to the ideology of nationalism or are they going to reject it? They are going to accept it. Indian nationalism को accept करेंगे because Muslim middle class भी जो regular middle class है उसी की values को adopt करेगा. That is secularism and nationalism. तो although initially जब मुस्लिम लीग का फॉर्मेशन हुआ, जब तक फ्यूडल क्लासेस उसको डोमिनेट कर रहे थे, तो दे रिमेन्ड प्रो ब्रिटिश एंड एंटी कांग्रेस बट सेक्युलर. But once the Muslim middle class came into the leadership from Jinnah onwards, 1912 onwards, they became distinctly nationalist and pro-Congress. अभी आगे जाकर के हम देखेंगे कि कांग्रेस और मुस्लिम लीग के बीच में 1916 में लखनऊ पैक्ट भी हुआ था, राइट? Following that, they agreed upon a common agenda also, right? So not only were the Indian Muslims and their political movement democratized as a result of this movement, this educational mission, they were also becoming more secular and nationalistic. Write down. Next point. Further, the Muslim politics of India became distinctly secular and nationalistic. Became distinctly secular and nationalistic under the influence of these changes. these changes. ठीक है, सो ये तो हो गए पॉजिटिव आउटकम्स इनकी लेगेसी का. नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट लिखो. However, Sir Sayyid's legacy also contains a dangerous undercurrent, which did tremendous harm to the Indian people. ठीक है, और क्या था वो डेंजरस अंडरकरेंट? What had he characterized the Congress as? A caste Hindu party. And by doing that, he was the first individual in modern Indian history to introduce the element of religion into politics. When religion is introduced into politics, तो उसको क्या बोला जाता है? Communal politics. ठीक है? So he was the first individual who communalized Indian politics. He looked at the political situation through the communal lens. So write down. Next point. By characterizing the Congress as a caste Hindu party, he permanently communalized Indian politics. He permanently communalized Indian politics. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. One major mistake that he made was that he was unable to appreciate the British design behind their advocacy for the Muslim educational mission. अंग्रेजों का असली ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या था? To divide and rule. And Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan allowed himself to be a tool in the hands of the British divide and rule apparatus. ठीक है, so write down. Sir Sayyid could not appreciate the true British intentions and became a willing participant of their divide and rule policy. Of their divide and rule policy. ठीक है, now since he was the pioneer of Muslim political activism in India, the trend that he had set could never be reversed. So even later Muslim leaders held on to the same old legacy of communal politics. They always continued to perceive the political aspirations of Indian Hindus and Muslims separately. and later on as mutually exclusive and even competitive. And that is why when the Muslim League was created in 1906, it was also an offshoot of the Mohammedan Educational Conference, जो कि सर सैयद ने 1886 में शुरू करी थी. It was supposed to be an apolitical body. तो 1906 में 20 years after its inception, finally ढाका में एक मीटिंग हुआ दिसंबर 1906 में. वहां पे मुस्लिम एजुकेशनल कॉन्फ्रेंस के जो टॉप लीडर्स थे, नवाब सलीमुल्लाह और ढाका, आगा खान, वकार उल मुल्क, मोहसिन उल मुल्क, इन लोगों ने एक रेजोल्यूशन पास किया दैट दे आर गोइंग टू सेट अप अ सेपरेट मुस्लिम पॉलिटिकल पार्टी. उसको मुस्लिम लीग नाम दिया. एंड उनकी इनिशियल डिमांड्स में क्या डिमांड था? सेपरेट इलेक्टरेट्स का डिमांड था. This separate electorates demand became a permanent sticking point in the relationship between the Congress and the Muslim League, and hence between the Hindus and the Muslims. By creating the Muslim League, the leaders of the Muslim League, who were the intellectual successors of Sir Sayyid, they had stripped away a portion of the Muslim intellectual support in favor of the Muslim League as opposed to the Congress. So the creation of the Muslim League actually prevented the Congress from emerging as a true representative of Muslims. एक alternative ये भी हो सकता था that the Muslim leadership may have actively engaged with the Congress, may have asked for its own interest to be represented in a more fair and equitable manner within the Congress. लेकिन वो वाला path नहीं choose हुआ because Congress had in the very beginning been labeled as a caste Hindu party. तो जो trust deficit था ना between the Congress and the Muslims, that continued even later on. फॉर अ पर्टिकुलर पीरियड ऑफ टाइम 1912 से लेकर के 1928 तक जो पुराने डिफरेंसेस थे दे वर बेरिड, बट 1928 के बाद दे बिकेम vehemently apparent, they became very very visible, and they caused a great degree of damage, right? आगे लिखो. सर सैयद is regarded by many as the father of Indian communalism. Of Indian communalism. And this is not only because of his communalization of Indian politics, but he is professing the idea that the interests of Indian Hindus, political interests of Indian Hindus and Indian Muslims are distinct. They are separate. They can never align, right? And इस आइडिया से आगे चल के जब ये आइडिया मैच्योर होगा तो कौन सा आइडिया निकलेगा? टू नेशन थ्योरी का आइडिया, दैट द पीपल ऑफ इंडिया रिप्रेजेंट टू सेपरेट नेशनल कम्युनिटीज, द मुस्लिम नेशन एंड द हिंदू नेशन. दोनों के इंटरेस्ट कभी अलाइन हो नहीं सकते हैं. दे आर म्यूचुअली कॉम्पिटिटिव एंड म्यूचुअली एक्सक्लूसिव. Thus, it is better that instead of them living forcibly under the same nation state, there should be टू सेपरेट नेशन स्टेट्स. तो जो सेपरेटिज्म का आइडिया है, टू नेशन थ्योरी का आइडिया है, पाकिस्तान डिमांड है, वो कुछ इंडियन हिस्टोरियंस बोलते हैं कि सब इन्हीं का इंटेलेक्चुअल फ्रूट निकल के आया. आगे जाके जो मुस्लिम लीडर्स सच एज जिन्ना, लियाकत अली खान एटसेट्रा, इन्होंने प्रोफेस किया जो आइडियाज, वो इन्हीं के इंटेलेक्चुअल देन है. ठीक है, तो क्या लिखा है आपने? Sir Sayyid is regarded by many as the father of Indian communalism. Sub point लिखो. Not only did he communalize Indian politics, not only did he communalize Indian politics, but his emphasis that the political interests of Hindus and Muslims were exclusive and can never align, and can never align ultimately resulted in the emergence of the two-nation theory, Pakistan demand, communal riots, and partition. And partition. ठीक है? बट कुछ हिस्टोरियंस हैं जिनका ये मानना है that calling him the father of Indian communalism is unfair. First of all, Indian communalism was something that was deliberately promoted by the British. Yes, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan made a mistake. He did not appreciate the true British intentions, but उनके intentions यहाँ पे ज्यादा मैटर करते हैं. These historians argue कि जैसे राजा राम मोहन रॉय हिंदूज को मॉडर्नाइज और अपलिफ्ट करने की कोशिश कर रहे थे, सेम थिंग सर सैयद अहमद खान वाज ट्राइंग टू डू फॉर द मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी ऑफ इंडिया. सेकेंडली, his positive contribution should have been overlooked when he has been assessed as the father of Indian communalism. And thirdly, if we accept that Sir Syed did play a role in spreading communalism, then we should also not ignore the role played by other leaders such as Bal Gangadhar Tilak or Madan Mohan Malviya or even Mahatma Gandhi. बाल गंगाधर तिलक, मदन मोहन मालवीय हिंदू शॉविनिज्म के सब्सक्राइबर्स थे. दे वर द सपोर्टर्स ऑफ द आइडिया ऑफ हिंदुत्व, राइट. दे wanted Indian Muslims to adopt the Hindu customs. That would never have been acceptable. Gandhi ji did more to communalize Indian politics than Sir Syed. इन्होंने ही खिलाफत का इशू यहाँ पे इंडिया में इतना पॉपुलराइज किया. एंड दैट वाज द फर्स्ट पॉइंट ऑफ कांटेक्ट जब इंडियन मुस्लिम मासेस एक्चुअली पॉलिटिक्स में उतरे, राइट. तो उनकी शुरुआत ही बहुत कम्युनल एजेंडा के साथ हुई थी. एंड द लेगेसी ऑफ कम्युनलिज्म, उसके लिए जितना सर सैयद को ब्लेम कर रहे हैं हम, उतना औरों को भी ब्लेम करना चाहिए. And finally, we should also take a look at Sir Sayyid's own attitude towards communal harmony. Once very famously, he had noted that India is like a beautiful bride with its two eyes. एक हिंदूज है, दूसरे मुस्लिम्स हैं. अगर एक डैमेज हो जाता है, bride would no longer be beautiful. Many of the earliest graduates of the Aligarh Muslim University were in fact Hindus also. तो Muslims और Hindus दोनों students वहाँ पे allowed थे, दोनों को साथ में तालीम मिलती थी. This was resulting in better and better understanding of each other. So instead of communalism, religious harmony was the result. Further, जो अलीगढ़ मुस्लिम यूनिवर्सिटी के लिए लैंड था, that was donated to Sir Sayyid by a local Hindu Raja, Mahendra Pratap Singh, right? So all of this shows that Sir Syed never actively promoted communalism. Rather, even while he proposed to the Indian Muslims that they should remain loyal to the British, he also appealed to them to have friendly relations with the Hindus. He asked them to stay away from communal appeals by their local Maulvis. ये सब भी उन्होंने एडवोकेट किया. अगर हम इनको फादर ऑफ इंडियन कम्युनिज्म बोल रहे हैं, तो ये बाकी जो फैक्ट्स हैं वी हैव कन्वीनियंटली ओवरलुक्ड देम. ठीक है, तो नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो, नेक्स्ट मेन पॉइंट. However, several prominent historians have also challenged this position on the following grounds. Challenge this position on the following grounds. 1 2 3 करके लिख लो. Number 1, while making this assessment, comma, Sir Sayyid's positive contributions have been conveniently overlooked. Number 2, Sir Sayyid was not looking to actively communalize Indian Muslims. Full stop. Like Raja Ram Mohan Roy sought to modernize Hindus, Sir Sayyid sought to modernize Muslims. Number 3, Sir Sayyid's personal outlook was highly secular. And he was a great supporter, of religious harmony. Appealing to Muslims to remain friendly and peaceful towards Hindus. Number 4, नहीं नंबर 4, अभी 3 सब पॉइंट लिखे ना आपने, चौथा लिखो. If Sir Sayyid's role in spreading communalism is to be accepted, comma, the role of others, including the British government, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Madan Mohan Malviya, and Mahatma Gandhi should not be overlooked. ठीक है. In the end, हम क्या बोल सकते हैं? Should Sir Sayyid actually be considered to be the father of Indian communalism or not? To some degree, maybe, but largely, no. ठीक है? Take down a question. Do you agree with the assessment that Sir Sayyid Ahmad Khan was the father of Indian communalism? Question mark. 200 words. हो जाएगा ये? ठीक है, ये हो गया the liberal reformist movements. Now the revivalist movements. शुरू करते हैं the Wahabi movement से. Once again, सबसे पहले thoughts and objectives. Wahhabism था क्या? It was an extremist Islamic ideology that had started in Arabia under the leadership of a theologian, Wahab ibn Arbi. इंडिया से कई सारे इंटेलेक्चुअल्स, मुस्लिम इंटेलेक्चुअल जाते थे अरेबिया हज परफॉर्म करने के लिए. Over there, they came under the influence of this ideology and brought it back to India also. ठीक है? What did it stand for? It stood for two things. Firstly, the purification of Islam. So, over the period of time, जो भी un-Islamic practices, जो भी corruptions, pollutions Islamic practice में आ गए हैं, which have made the global Islamic community deviate from the early teachings of Islam, उनको remove करना है. और दूसरा, to establish an Islamic state. Right? कैसे करेंगे इस्लामिक स्टेट को एस्टैब्लिश? बाय परफॉर्मिंग जिहाद. ठीक है, राइट डाउन. The Wahabi movement was started in the late 18th century in Arabia by Wahab ibn Arbi. Wahab ibn Arbi in the late 18th century in Arabia by Wahab ibn Arbi. It was brought to India. It was brought to India by Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi and Shah Abdul Aziz. These were Islamic theologians from India. ठीक है? In the early 19th century. In the early 19th century. Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi from Rai Bareli and Shah Abdul Aziz from Delhi. Next point. It had the twin objectives of वन एंड टू लिख लो. Purifying Islam by removing all un-Islamic practices. All un-Islamic practices. And number 2, establishing an Islamic state. Establishing an Islamic state. ठीक है? Next point. The Wahhabis in India established their headquarters at Sithna in the northwest frontier province. At Sithna in the northwest frontier province in 1820. Sithna in the NWFP in 1820. In 1820. And launched a jihad. तो ये नॉर्थ वेस्ट फ्रंटियर प्रोविंस का एरिया 1820 में किसकी हुकूमत के अंदर आता था? रंजीत सिंह की हुकूमत के अंदर, द सिख एम्पायर, राइट? लॉन्च्ड अ जिहाद अगेंस्ट द सिख एम्पायर. Next point, they wanted to convert Punjab from Darul Harb into Darul Islam. ठीक है? Not only by establishing the heretical state by an Islamic state, but by also forcibly converting the people of Punjab to Islam. Clear? From Darul Harb to Darul Islam. दार का मतलब होता है घर, ठीक है? तो इट वॉज द हाउस ऑफ, हर्ब मतलब होता है इनफिडेल, और इस्लाम इज दीन, इस्लाम, दारुल इस्लाम. तो अ लैंड ऑफ इनफिडेल्स टू अ लैंड ऑफ इस्लाम, और लैंड ऑफ नॉन बिलीवर्स टू अ लैंड ऑफ इस्लाम. ठीक है? तो ये हो गए इनके थॉट्स एंड ऑब्जेक्टिव्स. क्या है इनका ऑब्जेक्टिव? Twin objectives हैं: to purify Islam and simultaneously to establish an Islamic state through jihad. In India, they focused in the region of Punjab, setting up their headquarters at Sithna and launching a jihad against the Sikh empire of Maharaja Ranjit Singh with the objective of converting it from Darul Harb to Darul Islam. तो ये हो गए इनके thoughts and objectives. Next subheading दो, Wahhabis up to 1857. Wahhabis up to 1857. Their initial rivals कौन थे? Sikh Empire, right? Write down. The Wahhabis fought a series of battles against the Sikh Empire. during the 1820s and 30s. During the 1820s and 30s. Subpoint. The most famous among them was the Battle of Balakot. Was the Battle of Balakot, 1830, in which Sayyid Ahmad Barelvi was killed. And their movement slowed down. And their movement slowed down. ठीक है? Next point, next main point. After the annexation of Punjab, the Wahhabis began targeting किसको? अंग्रेजों को, क्योंकि अब उनकी हुकूमत थी. Began targeting the British. And was the British Empire limited only to Punjab? No. So in India, wherever there was British influence, they tried to spread their influence over there. Targeted the British and spread to other parts of North India. With Ambala, Delhi, Faizabad, and Patna emerging as prominent Wahhabi centers. Ambala, Delhi, Faizabad, and Patna emerging as prominent Wahhabi centers. Full stop. Next point. During the revolt of 1857, did they participate or not? They participated in large numbers. Wahhabis participated in large numbers. लेकिन एक डिस्टिंक्ट एलिमेंट देखने के लिए मिल रहा था. क्या? Earlier their attitude towards any other non-Muslims, चाहे वो Hindus हो, चाहे Sikhs हो, चाहे Christians हो, it was very, very hostile. But during the revolt of 1857, they forgot their original differences and cooperated with the Hindus of North India. ठीक है? So write down. They participated in large numbers and cooperated with Hindu rebels as well. Cooperated with Hindu rebels as well. ठीक है? Now, as the rebellion was crushed, the Wahhabi enclaves and centers were also targeted. As the next point, rebellion was crushed. Many Wahhabi leaders were killed or arrested. Killed or arrested. और जिनको एप्रीहेंड कर लिया था, अब उनके ऊपर कोर्ट की कार्रवाई होगी. They were tried and Patna trials, in the Ambala and Patna trials, and were given harsh sentences, या तो डेथ पेनल्टी या फिर लाइफ imprisonment. They were tried in the Ambala and Patna trials and were given harsh sentences. ठीक है. Following this, the Wahhabi leadership was almost out of the picture, and इसके बाद a new generation of leaders is going to emerge. So sub point लिख लो. With this, the Wahhabi leadership was eliminated. The Wahhabi leadership was eliminated, and a new generation of leaders emerged. So this was the history of the Wahhabi movement before the revolt of 1857. Next, after the revolt of 1857. लिखो. Two Wahhabi scholars Rashid Ahmad Gangohi and Qasim Nanotwi established the Dar ul Ulum at देवबंद. कहाँ है ये? नियर सहारनपुर. At देवबंद as a premier institute of traditional Islamic education. Of traditional Islamic education. ठीक है. Now they inherited the social attitudes of the rebels during the 1857 revolt. तो Wahhabis ने क्या दिखाया था? They were nationalist and they were open to cooperation with Hindus. So write down. They inherited the social attitudes of the rebels on the rebels, full stop. That is, they remained hostile to the British, but were open to cooperation with other Indians. With other Indians. ठीक है? Full stop. And in doing this, they also diverged from another section of Indian Muslims. कौन? जो अलीगढ़ स्कूल वाले मुसलमान थे, right? They had what kind of attitude towards the British? Pro-British, और इनका anti-British. Write down. In this, उसी point में, in this, comma, they also diverged from the Aligarh School Muslim Intelligentsia. From the Aligarh School Muslim Intelligentsia. Is this clear? Now, the Darul Uloom would go on to attract scholars not only from across the Indian subcontinent but even from beyond. So, Afghanistan से, अरेबिया से, मलेशिया से, इंडोनेशिया से, कई जगह से यहाँ पर लोग आते थे पढ़ने के लिए. And what was the result of this? The level of intellectual enterprise that was going out and on at Darul Uloom during this period was unmatched anywhere else in the world. This elevated the prestige of the Darul Uloom. तो जब भी कोई मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी के लिए, ग्लोबल मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट क्वेश्चंस आते थे, ऑल आईज वुड टर्न टुवर्ड्स देवबंद की यहाँ के जो आलिम हैं वो क्या इंटरप्रिटेशन देंगे, वो क्या अपने ये देंगे, क्या बोलते हैं, रूलिंग्स देंगे, राइट? तो not only was prestige very high, but it also produced some very you can say illustrious alumni. Write down. Next point. The Darul Uloom attracted scholars from around the world and produced an illustrious class of alumni. Full stop. Sub point. This elevated its prestige across the Islamic world. This elevated its prestige across the Islamic world. And Muslims began looking towards it for leadership. Next point. Some of its famous alumni include the Ali brothers, Hakim Ajmal Khan, Abdul Bari, and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. ठीक है? On the basis of this class of graduates एक चीज और पता लग रही होगी, that the Deoband school must have played an active role during the mass phase of the national movement also. ये प्रो गांधीयन रहे होंगे, एंटी गांधीयन रहे होंगे? प्रो गांधीयन रहे होंगे, राइट? एंड इट इज in the backdrop of the Khilafat non-cooperation movement that they joined the Congress movement whole soul. ठीक है, write down. In the backdrop of the Khilafat issue or Khilafat movement, the Deobandis wholeheartedly supported Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma Gandhi. सब पॉइंट लिखो. In order to promote Hindu-Muslim unity, in order to promote Hindu-Muslim unity, इन्होंने दो चीजें करी. क्या? First of all, they abandoned the objective of converting India from Darul Harb into Darul Islam. They accepted India as Darul Harb only. And the second thing that they did was they appealed to Muslims across India not to slaughter cows or hurt the religious sentiments of Hindus. क्या लिखा है आपने अभी? In Hindu-Muslim unity, they abandoned the ideal of Darul Islam and appealed to Muslims, abandoned the ideal of Darul Islam and appealed to Muslims not to slaughter cows and respect the religious sentiments of Hindus. The religious sentiments of Hindus. ठीक है? Now, following the failure of the Khilafat non-cooperation movement and especially during the decade of the 1930s, जब इंडिया में कम्युनलिज्म की हवा बहुत तेजी से बह रही थी, when a number of communal riots took place across India, और जब अलीगढ़ स्कूल के मुस्लिम जो लिबरल मुस्लिम्स थे, they started to get heavily communalized. What was the response of this traditional Islamic school? They continued to be pro-nationalist, pro-Congress and secular attitude. इन्होंने बरकरार रखा. Write down. Later, next point. Later, even in the backdrop of charged communalism, backed by the Aligarh school Muslims, during the 1930s and 40s, the Deobandis remained committed to Hindu-Muslim unity and vehemently opposed The Pakistan demand. Vehemently opposed the Pakistan demand. So जब कांग्रेस लीडरशिप के सामने वो डिलेमा आया कि पाकिस्तान डिमांड को एक्सेप्ट कर लें या फिर कम्युनल राइट्स को चलने दें, तो कांग्रेस लीडरशिप हैड रिलक्टेंटली अग्रीड टू इट, बट जो देवबंदी स्कॉलर्स थे एंड देयर रिप्रेजेंटेटिव मौलाना आजाद, they never agreed to that demand even till the very end. Okay, so they remained vehemently opposed to the Pakistan demand. Since independence, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, सिंस इंडिपेंडेंस क्या रोल रहा है देवबंदीज का? नाउ रिसेंटली कोल्ड वॉर पीरियड एंड लेटर के बाद से वी आर सीइंग ग्लोबली द ट्रेंड ऑफ राइजिंग रिलीजियस फंडामेंटलिज्म, स्पेशली अमंग द मुस्लिम यूथ. अलग अलग कंट्रीज में हो रहा है, कई सारे एक्सट्रीमिस्ट मूवमेंट्स भी इमर्ज हुए हैं. इन दैट सिनेरियो द देवबंद मूवमेंट हैज हैड अ moderating influence on the trends of radicalism within Islam. So write down, since independence, the Deoband school has had a moderating influence, has had a moderating influence on the rising trend of Islamic religious fundamentalism. Of Islamic religious fundamentalism, right? So as we have discussed previously, the Deoband school was able to establish itself as the most prestigious school of traditional Islamic learning across the world, and therefore जब fundamental questions arise होते हैं with regards to the Islamic faith, all eyes turn towards this school and its scholars. So through their opinions, through their interpretations, they have had a moderating influence. For example, in one famous opinion expressed by an alim of this school, he said that terrorism is fundamentally un-Islamic. उसको जिहाद का कैटेगरी नहीं दे सकते हैं, because terrorism involves the killing of innocents, and according to him the killing of a single innocent is like ending the entire universe. ठीक है, so it is un-Islamic. तो इस तरह का उसका influence रहा है, तो that is their legacy now. क्लियर है? तो ये हो गया the Wahabi movement. क्या है ये? It is a puritanical movement, but over time it has had certain positive outcomes. Positive legacy भी इसका छोटा है. Next, we have Swami Dayanand Saraswati and his Arya Samaj. ठीक है? So first of all, his thought down. He established the Arya Samaj in 1875 at Bombay, and later its headquarters were established at Lahore. At Lahore. ठीक है? हाँ, तो हेडक्वार्टर्स 2 साल बाद 1877 में लाहौर में परमानेंट हेडक्वार्टर्स एस्टैब्लिश कर दिए. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट, he he subscribed to the philosophy of the Vedas and Upanishads, which he considered to be the perfect expression of logic. Of logic. The perfect expression of logic. Perfect logic है इनका, कोई flaw नहीं है according to him. So if he considers the Vedas and Upanishads to be perfect and complete, is he going to accept the teachings of any other sources? नहीं, कोई जरूरत नहीं है उसकी. Write down. Consequently, he rejected the teachings of other sources such as the Purans, the Quran, or the Bible, etc. तो पुराण, कुरान, बाइबल सब कुछ रिजेक्ट कर दिया. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. In his book Satyarth Prakash, he preaches monotheism and prescribes that we should go back to the Vedas, in order to solve all our social problems. Now, apart from this, he also wrote some other books, including the Ved Bhashya. This is his Sanskrit treatise on the Vedas and the Ved Bhashya Bhumika, which is partly written in Sanskrit, partly in Hindi. It is supposed to allow a lay person who is not well versed in Sanskrit to understand the vocabulary of the Ved Bhashya. Okay? Write down. Apart from this, he also wrote the Ved Bhashya and Ved Bhashya Bhumika. The Ved Bhashya and Ved Bhashya Bhumika. ठीक है, ये हो गया इनका थॉट. नेक्स्ट is contribution to social reform. considering the Rig Vedic society to be the ideal society, comma, Swami Dayanand advocated for the removal of all practices which were not found in it. ठीक है, तो ऋग वैदिक सोसाइटी में जो जो प्रैक्टिसेस नहीं थी उनको मॉडर्न सोसाइटी में भी नहीं होना चाहिए अकॉर्डिंग टू हिम. दीज इंक्लूडेड, सब पॉइंट लिख सकते हो, दीज इंक्लूडेड social evils such as parda, the caste system, sati, child marriage, rigid varna system, female infanticide, dowry, priestly domination, and the exclusion of women and lower castes from education and several occupations. From education and several occupations. Along with others, etc. लिख सकते हो, etc. ठीक है, तो ये सारी चीजें क्योंकि ऋग्वैदिक सोसाइटी में नहीं थी, देयरफॉर मॉडर्न सोसाइटी में भी नहीं होनी चाहिए. एंड दीज वर एक्चुअली द वेरियस सोशल इविल्स प्लेगिंग द इंडियन सोसाइटी. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. he also encouraged intercaste marriages and widow remarriage. Intercaste marriages and widow remarriage. ठीक है, नेक्स्ट पॉइंट. he was opposed to idol worship, pilgrimage, and any kind of formalized rituals. Formalized rituals. Do you think he was interested in building temples? No. But ultimately, he did end up constructing Arya Samaj temples. Write down. Although he was opposed to The temple cult he began constructing Arya Samaj temples. आगे लिखो, in order to Arya Samaj temples, in order to A and B. क्यों किया होगा इन्होंने? A, to promote religious worship with simplicity, and second, B, to facilitate intercaste marriages without dowry and priestly intervention. ठीक है? Because intercaste marriages or marriages without the exchange of dowry would not be solemnized by priests outside such temples. Regular temples में या फिर open society में नहीं ये conduct करवाई जाएंगी. So that is why he had to introduce his own Arya Samaj temples. इसके पीछे एक और reason था that in 1878 the government introduced the Universal Marriage Act, which gave legal recognition to court marriages. ठीक है? Now he did not want that marriage, which is considered to be a sacrosanct among Indian Hindus, should leave the traditional umbrella of Indian religion and could be performed in a secular setting. So he did want it to be performed according to some religious rituals or with some religious sanction, but आउटसाइड द कोर्ट सेटिंग. ठीक है? तो कोर्ट्स को ये नहीं चाहते थे कि रिप्लेस कर दें इंडियन टेम्पल्स को या फिर इंडियन सोसाइटी को. तो दैट इज व्हाई ही इंट्रोड्यूस्ड हिज ओन टेम्पल्स. सो these were his roles in this thing, socio-religious reforms. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट लिखो. The controversial movement of Arya Samaj. ऑल्दो कई सारे पॉजिटिव आउटकम्स हुए, कुछ कंट्रोवर्सीज भी इससे एसोसिएटेड है. क्या कंट्रोवर्सी है? फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, the Arya Samaj movement is considered to be the pioneer of the हिंदुत्व आइडियोलॉजी. ठीक है? अब क्या होता है हिंदुत्व? आप कंपेयर कर सकते हो, जैसे इस्लाम के लिए इस्लामिज्म होता है वैसे हिंदुइज्म के लिए हिंदुत्व होता है. सो इट इज अ पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजी एसोसिएटेड विद द आइडेंटिटी ऑफ द people of India as Hindus, right? Now, जो आर्य समाज का मूवमेंट था, that was coming from a place of insecurity, coming from a place of fear. They tried to push this notion that Hinduism, that is Sanatan Dharma, is under threat. By whom? by Islam, Christianity, and the West. ठीक है? And therefore, Hinduism needs to protect itself. It needs to strengthen itself. Now, difference between Hinduism and other organized religions such as Islam or Christianity is that Hinduism में कोई यूनिवर्सल सेट ऑफ वैल्यूज या फिर कोई आइडेंटिटी मार्कर्स नहीं होते हैं. इट इज नॉट कंसिडर्ड टू बी एन ऑर्गेनाइज्ड रिलीजन इन दी ट्रेडिशनल सेंस. इस्लाम का फाउंडर आप आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हो, क्रिश्चियनिटी का फाउंडर आप आइडेंटिफाई कर सकते हो. दोनों की एक ही यूनिवर्सल किताबें हैं, दोनों की एक ही प्लेसेस ऑफ पिलग्रिमेज है, जो फाउंडेशनल प्लेस ऑफ पिलग्रिमेज होता है, राइट. हिंदुइज्म में ऐसा कोई एक होता है? नहीं. इस्लाम और क्रिश्चियनिटी में यूनिवर्सल सिंबल्स एसोसिएटेड हैं, यूनिवर्सल फिगर्स एसोसिएटेड हैं. हिंदुइज्म में कुछ भी ऐसा नहीं है. इस्लाम और क्रिश्चियनिटी आर डिस्टिंक्टली मोनोथिएस्टिक फेथ्स. हिंदुइज्म में ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. फेस्टिवल्स दोनों के एक होते हैं, फेस्टिवल्स अलग अलग होते हैं. इस्लाम और क्रिश्चियंस में ऑल्दो ग्लोबली रीजनल डिफरेंसेस होते हैं, बट कुछ ऐसे आइडेंटिटी मार्कर्स होते हैं which can distinguish them as followers of a particular religion. That means belief in a particular article of faith, some article of their diet जो कि कॉमन रहेगा. हिंदुइज्म में ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, right? And therefore, in order to withstand this external challenge, जरूरी क्या था कि हिंदुइज्म को एक नया आइडेंटिटी कार्ड देना है, right? So they tried to create and assert a universal identity to all Hindus. Hindus across India एक ही तरह का खाना खाना चाहिए. That is characterized by vegetarianism और नॉन वेजिटेरियनिज्म. वेजिटेरियनिज्म. तो अगर असली हिंदू है तो पक्का वेजिटेरियन होना चाहिए. एक ही तरह की पोशाक पहननी चाहिए. हेयर कट एक तरह का होना चाहिए. हेयर कट कैसा? बाल एकदम टॉन्सर्ड है, मतलब दे आर शेप्ड ऑफ, चोटी रख रखी है पीछे. कपड़े किस रंग के? भगवा रंग के पहनने चाहिए. लैंग्वेज कौन सी बोलनी चाहिए? केवल और केवल हिंदी बोलनी चाहिए. Now, do you think that this kind of agenda is going to appeal to a wide cross section of Hindus? नहीं. तो most Hindus are going to reject it. It is going to also cause unnecessary tensions within the Hindu community. Secondly, ये जो identity है, that is informed by which kind of values? Brahmanical values or non-Brahmanical values? Brahmanical values. So it is definitely going to create a rift between the upper caste and lower caste Hindus. Second thing that they tried to do is to assert that all Indians are Hindus as well. ठीक है? So they tried to bring all Indians under the umbrella of Hinduism. So not only did they try to create and assert a universal identity on Hindus, but on all inhabitants of India. चाहे वो मुसलमान हो, चाहे सिख हो, चाहे क्रिश्चियंस हो, चाहे बुद्धिस्ट हो, चाहे जैन्स हो. They said that all of them are Hindus, केवल अलग अलग sects of Hinduism को follow कर रहे हैं. So do you think this is going to be accepted by other practitioners? नहीं. अदर सेक्ट्स इसको, रिलीजन्स इसको रिजेक्ट कर देंगे. बट व्हाट इज गोइंग टू बी द रिजल्ट? म्यूचुअल सस्पिशंस आर गोइंग टू इंक्रीज, टेंशंस आर गोइंग टू इंक्रीज. एंड ऑन द ग्राउंड लेवल किस तरह से ट्रांसलेट होकर के आएंगे ये? इन द फॉर्म ऑफ रिलीजियस वायलेंस, कम्युनलिज्म एटसेट्रा. ठीक है? फर्दर कुछ इनके स्पेसिफिक कंट्रोवर्शियल मूवमेंट्स भी स्टार्ट हुए, सच एज दी cow protection movement. Now, the slaughtering and consumption of cow meat was a common practice among Indian Muslims for a very long time, especially during particular religious festivals. So during these festivities, जत्थे निकलते थे आर्य समाजीज के to prohibit or prevent cows from being slaughtered. रिजल्ट क्या होगा? भीड़ दोनों तरफ से जमीन पे उतरी हुई है, सड़क पे उतरी हुई है, एंड वायलेंस इज गोइंग टू रिजल्ट. देन देयर वाज अ मूवमेंट नोन एज द शुद्धि मूवमेंट. शुद्धि का मतलब घर वापसी, टू कन्वर्ट Hindu converts to Islam back into the fold of Hinduism. Now, this was done primarily in the region of Punjab and Rajasthan. Northern Rajasthan और पंजाब में इसको pursue किया गया. Some Muslim Rajputs were converted back to Hinduism. Then we had the Sangathan movement. Right? So, in order to strengthen the communal bonds between Hindus from different backgrounds, कम्युनिटी गैदरिंग्स वर ऑर्गेनाइज. तो जहां पर अलग अलग लीडर्स आकर के कुछ प्रवचन देंगे, कुछ मैसेज देंगे, दे आर गोइंग टू गिव सर्टेन इंस्ट्रक्शंस, कुछ प्रिस्क्रिप्शंस देंगे, सो दैट द कम्युनल बॉन्ड्स बिटवीन हिंदूज वुड बी स्ट्रेंथेंड. एंड इस मैसेज में एक डेंजरस एलिमेंट भी था. क्या? इट हैड द टेंडेंसी टू अदराइज द नॉन हिंदू. तो नॉन हिंदूज को एक थ्रेट की तरह परसीव किया गया, एंड दिस मैसेज was spread to all the people associated with this Sangathan movement. And this also invited a reaction from the Muslim community. तो अगर एक तरफ के हिंदुस्तानी जाहिल हैं तो दूसरी साइड वाले जिहालत दिखाने में शर्म नहीं करेंगे. तो शुद्धि मूवमेंट के रिएक्शन में आया तंजीम मूवमेंट, जिनको शुद्धि में रिकन्वर्ट किया गया था उनको वापस से रिकन्वर्ट किया जाएगा. और संगठन के रिएक्शन में आया तबलीग मूवमेंट. तबलीगी जमात आपने सुना होगा, राइट? तो वहां पे भी सिमिलर मैसेज था. रिजल्ट क्या हुआ? बोथ कम्युनिटीज केम क्लोजर विद इन ईच अदर बट बिकेम मोर डिस्टेंट फ्रॉम ईच अदर. ठीक है? और शुद्धि और तंजीम मूवमेंट की वजह से रिलीजियस हेट्रेड, फ्रिक्शन दैट इज गोइंग टू इंक्रीज. एंड फाइनली एक लास्ट कंट्रोवर्शियल मूवमेंट था टू प्रोहिबिट द मैरिज ऑफ हिंदू विडोज टू मुस्लिम विमेन और मुस्लिम मेन. सो इसको नाम दिया गया दैट मुस्लिम्स आर लूटिंग हिंदू विमेन. सो टू प्रिवेंट द लूटिंग ऑफ हिंदू विमेन. ठीक है? नाउ हुआ क्या कि सहारनपुर वाले एरिया में some Muslim scholars began advocating to the members of their community that they should marry Hindu women. अब उसके पीछे कई सारे factors थे. One of the justifications was that आपका भी घर बस जाएगा, बढ़ जाएगा, और ये जो हिंदू women है who are destitute, who are helpless, they would also receive a new family. आर्य समाजीज ने एलिगेशन लगाया दैट दिस इज अ प्लॉट बाय द मुस्लिम्स टू इंक्रीज द पॉपुलेशन, मुस्लिम पॉपुलेशन, एंड कन्वर्ट इंडिया फ्रॉम दारुल हर्ब इनटू दारुल इस्लाम बाय फियट, बाय स्ट्रेंथ ऑफ नंबर्स. राइट? तो इसको जो प्रिवेंट करने के लिए गए, शादियां तोड़ने के लिए गए, तो ऑब्वियसली रिएक्शन आएगा. राइट? तो दैट इज व्हाट हैपेंड. दिस इज द कंट्रोवर्शियल एस्पेक्ट ऑफ द आर्य समाजी मूवमेंट. इसको जल्दी से एक बार लिख लेते हैं. राइट डाउन. The Arya Samajis considered the Hindu culture and identity to be threatened by Islam, Christianity, and the West and the West to be threatened by Islam, Christianity, and the West. Stop. Thus, it was important. Thus, it was important to assert the symbols and identity of the Sanatan Dharma. Of the Sanatan Dharma. Next point. Hinduism is not a, an organized religion, in the traditional sense. In the traditional sense. Full stop. Rather, it is a collection of diverse sects, beliefs, and practices. Full stop. Subpoint. The Arya Samaj attempted to homogenize it by asserting universal symbols, which did not appeal to all Hindus and caused friction. Appeal to all Hindus and caused friction. Appeal to all Hindus and caused friction. ठीक है? Next point. Additionally, next main point. Additionally, they emphasized that all the original inhabitants of India are Hindus. Irrespective of their religious denomination. Full stop. This also caused suspicion and friction among religious minorities. Next point. Lastly, during the 1920s and 30s, the Arya Samaj launched some controversial movements that directly contributed to communal riots. Full stop. Next point. These include ABCD करके ये चारों लिख लो. Cow protection movement, Shuddhi movement, Sangathan movement, and movement to prevent the looting of Hindu women. Movement to prevent the looting of Hindu women. ठीक है, समझ में आया ये? Right. तो ये हो गया controversial movement within the Arya Samaj, and lastly his legacy. His legacy. Now, Swami Dayanand Saraswati died in 1883, following which there emerged a split within the Arya Samaj. Swami Dayanand Saraswati died in 1883, following which a split emerged in the Arya Samaj. तो दो ग्रुप्स इमर्ज हो गए, लिबरल्स एंड कंजर्वेटिव्स. लिबरल्स में लाला लाजपत राय एंड लाला हरदयाल, सॉरी, लाला हंसराज, लाला लाजपत राय एंड लाला हंसराज. और कंजर्वेटिव्स में स्वामी सहजानंद सरस्वती. इनके बीच में जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट था दैट वाज बेसिकली ऑन टू इश्यूज. फर्स्टली on the issue of vegetarianism. Liberals क्या बोलेंगे? Should vegetarianism be compulsory or not compulsory? Not compulsory. It should be voluntary. और conservatives क्या बोलेंगे? That it should be compulsory. ठीक है. दूसरा इशू था एजुकेशन. Conservatives would want which kind of education? Traditional Indian education to be spread through gurukuls. एंड जो लिबरल सेक्शन है वो क्या बोलेगा कि कोएड एजुकेशन होना चाहिए, बोथ गर्ल्स एंड बॉयज शुड बी गिवन एजुकेशन. It should be a combination of traditional Indian education as well as modern Western education. So, co-ed, Anglo, Vedic education. Right? लिबरल फैक्शन है, इन्होंने क्या एस्टैब्लिश किया? सबसे पहले 1886 में डीएवी कॉलेज एट लाहौर एंड देन a series of DAV schools and colleges across the country. Right? And स्वामी सहजानंद सरस्वती ने क्या एस्टैब्लिश किया? गुरुकुल. कहां पर? कांगड़ी, हरिद्वार. Establish the Gurukul Kangri at Haridwar. ठीक है. Now, during the 20th century, a number of Indian nationalists, deeply inspired by the Arya Samaj and its teachings, established their own institutions. So, in 1915, for example, Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya, Lala Lajpat Rai, and V.D. Savarkar established the All India Hindu Mahasabha. ठीक है? Write down. In 1915, Madan Mohan Malviya, Lala Lajpat Rai, and V.D. Savarkar, who were heavily inspired by the Arya Samaj, established the All India Hindu Mahasabha. Established the All India Hindu Mahasabha. In 1916, Madan Mohan Malviya and Annie Besant laid the foundations of the Central Hindu College at Banaras. Which later became the Banaras Hindu University. Next point. In 1925, H.D. Edgewar established the राष्ट्रीय स्वयं सेवक संघ RSS as the cultural wing. HD Hedgewar established the Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh RSS as the cultural wing of the Hindu Mahasabha. Of the Hindu Mahasabha. Full stop. Next point. Political leaders associated with the Arya Samaj played a prominent role in the freedom struggle. Played a prominent role in the freedom struggle. However, it cannot be denied that they also contributed to the growing communalism of Indian politics, and indirectly caused the partition of India. ठीक है, तो देखो Congress on the one hand tried to represent the interests of all Indians, both Hindus as well as Muslims. The Hindu Mahasabha advocated for the interests of Hindus, while the Muslim League advocated for the interests of Muslims. ठीक है, तो कांग्रेस इन दोनों एक्सट्रीम्स के बीच में एक सेंट्रल पोजीशन को रिप्रेजेंट करता था. Congress was also supposed to be a common platform where both Hindu interests as well as Muslim interests could be represented. It was supposed to act as a deliberative platform between the Muslim League and the Hindu Mahasabha as well. ठीक है, बट हुआ क्या, दैट मुस्लिम लीग ने कुछ ऐसे डिमांड्स रेज किए which were completely unacceptable to the Hindu Mahasabha. Congress, in the interest of greater harmony, was ready to make some compromises with the Muslim League. लेकिन हिंदू महासभा ने क्या बोला? The Congress is not really a secular policy. It is interested only in appeasing the Muslim League and Indian Muslims, and we reject this policy of appeasement. Now, the Congress during the 1920s had undergone its own reforms. It had internally democratized and become decentralized. Therefore, कांग्रेस रैंक एंड फाइल में जो हिंदू महासभा का एजेंडा था, that was resonating quite powerfully. तो कांग्रेस जो हिंदू महासभा का पोजीशन था उसको आउटराइट रिजेक्ट नहीं कर सकता था. Therefore, the Congress was also forced to withdraw its compromising position with the Muslim League. Ultimately Muslim League को क्या लगा कि हिंदू महासभा is making us impossible to cooperate with the Congress. तो अब ये दोनों अलग अलग ब्लॉक्स की तरह इमर्ज हो जाएंगे, with the Muslim League leaving the Congress and destroying all hopes for common action ultimately. Ultimately हुआ क्या? The Muslim League demands finally graduated, matured in the form of the Pakistan demand. Now, while both the Congress and Mahasabha were interested in preventing the Pakistan demand from succeeding, the Congress was ready to make more compromises as compared to the Mahasabha. तो महासभा के लिए partition was the better choice rather than compromise. Congress के लिए partition was the worst choice, so they were more interested in compromise, but the Mahasabha did not allow the Congress to compromise easily, right? And partition के बाद के जो developments हुए वो भी देख सकते हो आप. Hindu Mahasabha sympathizer Nathuram Godse was the one who assassinated Mahatma Gandhi because he believed that Mahatma Gandhi had directly contributed to partition because he was interested in appeasing the Muslims of India, right? So this is why we are saying that direct contribution तो नहीं था. Pakistan demand was always a Muslim League demand only. So direct contribution तो इनका था, but indirectly Hindu Mahasabha also contributed to partition. Clear है? Now, since independence, although the Arya Samaj has remained active, but it has emerged as a strictly apolitical organization that has focused primarily on social reform only. और किस तरह के इश्यूज इन्होंने रेज किए हैं? Since independence, लिखो, the Arya Samaj has focused primarily on socio-religious affairs. Socio-religious affairs such as socio-religious affairs such as prevention of child marriage, promoting widow remarriage, discouraging dowry, addressing problems related to human trafficking, bonded labor, and child labor. Famine relief, healthcare, and education. ठीक है? They have primarily focused on these things. तो ये हो गया आर्य समाज. क्लियर है इतना? अब दो हमारे बचते हैं, दैट इज द सोशल सर्वेंट्स ज्योतिबा फुले एंड स्वामी विवेकानंद, दैट वी आर गोइंग टू डू इन टुमारोज क्लास. ठीक है? उसके बाद नेशनलिज्म के बारे में एक छोटा सा कवरेज, एंड देन नेशनल मूवमेंट। तो राइज ऑफ इंडियन नेशनलिज्म के पीछे जो फैक्टर्स थे उसके बारे में बात करेंगे, और फिर उसके बाद इंडियन नेशनल। चलिए देन, थैंक यू फॉर योर टाइम। कल मिलते हैं।